This is your Kick-Ass Life podcast, episode number 153. And today's show is brought to you by Talkspace, the online therapy company that believes therapy should be affordable, confidential, and convenient. I'm always talking to you about how important therapy is, and a Talkspace therapist can help put you on the path to a happier life. For a special offer for our listeners, visit Talkspace.com/YKAL and use coupon code YKAL.
This is the Your Kick-Ass Life podcast with Andrea Owen, a no BS guide to self-help and badassery. Because ladies, let's face it, life's too short for it to not kick ass. And here's your host, the girl who serves it up straight with a side of crazy, Andrea Owen.
Hey there, ass kickers. Welcome to another episode of the podcast. And we have a Q&A episode for you today. I'm very excited. I love answering your questions. And I looked through the document that we have where all these questions land, and there were a couple that had the same theme. So today we are going to be talking about anxiety, and we're going to be talking about therapy, and we're going to talk about feelings. For the second question, I am phoning a friend. I'm bringing in my friend, my very, very good friend, Kate Anthony. She is someone who I talk to pretty much on a daily basis. And I wanted to have someone's perspective that wasn't just mine, someone else who struggles also with anxiety and has a lengthy relationship with therapy, and just to get her insight too. And I know that you'll love her as much as I do. I've had her on the podcast before on a Q&A. And when I saw these questions, I was like, ooh, Kate. Yes, we need to hear from Kate too. Before we jump into the very first question, I want to let you all know that the Tanning, Tacos, and Transformation Conference is officially open for registration, y'all. So the last 2 years, you may have heard me talk about this. We've been doing this is our third annual. So it's very, very exciting. We have got it down to a science now. And when I say we, I mean myself and my good coach buddies, Kira Sabin and Amy Smith. We are co-hosting this event. It's a conference this year in Orange County, California, in Huntington Beach. And the place that we're doing it at is literally on the beach, you guys. I don't use the word literally that often, but it literally is on the beach. Like just steps away from the sand. And we are so excited to bring this to you. It's in October. We are going to be covering topics around fear and the inner critic. We're going to be talking about confidence, female friendships, and communication, how to actually communicate in a very, very healthy way. So early bird pricing is going on right now. That ends soon. So if you want in on it, if you want to go check it out, where it is, how much it costs, all of that good stuff, go over to TTTconference.com. And the link, of course, is in the show notes for you to be able to just get to that easy peasy. All right, that's it for the announcements. And let's get on with the very first question from our podcast listener. So our first question comes from a woman named Stacey, and she says, "Hi, Andrea. I absolutely love your book and your podcast. As a 25-year-old with loads of anxiety, I have gained a ton of knowledge and also a great sense of support with your community. I've been seeing a therapist for a year, and I definitely have found myself obsessing over emotions and feelings when my sessions begin and end. Have you ever stopped therapy to take a break? It sometimes makes me feel like I put so much focus on feelings that I obsess over them and lose the rational side of myself." Well, the first thing that jumped out at me is, Stacey, you said, as a 25-year-old with loads of anxiety. I'm going to probably say this 17 times during this entire episode, me and Kate. I am not a doctor. You guys all know that. Disclaimer alert, disclaimer alert. I am not a doctor, but quote unquote, loads of anxiety seems to me that you should be talking about that with your therapist and going to a trusted general practitioner to see if medication is right for you. I'm not saying that it is. I am not prescribing medication to you, but I think it's a conversation that you might want to have. I was also a 25-year-old with loads of anxiety. Kate and I are both going to talk about our experiences a little bit later in the podcast, but I got to a point in my life where I felt like it was unmanageable. And I personally, and I don't know what the story is, Stacey. I don't know if you're even, maybe if you've been on medication before, if you're currently on medication. So again, this is all the information I have. But personally, I wanted to talk about this first because you also say, I lose the rational side of myself. So that to me speaks volumes, because when I was in that place of feeling so much anxiety on a pretty consistent basis, I had lost the rational side of myself. And for many people, that's what happens to us when we get into that place where anxiety kind of takes over our brains and takes over our lives. So personally, again, this is just my experience. Personally, I could not take the next step in my life. And what I mean by that is, I don't think that I could have started to heal my emotional state, started to understand what better coping skills looked like, started to have healthier relationships until I got my brain and my mental state to a place where I had a rational side. And I know that there's a lot of you listening who have struggled with anxiety disorder, either in the past or maybe currently, but I felt like my brain was like a runaway train and I couldn't keep up. And fortunately for me, it's been a long time since I've felt that way, and I haven't been on medication for about a decade. But looking back at the trajectory of my own personal development journey and how anxiety played a role in there is that I needed to get to a place of neutrality. So, and I couldn't do that when my anxiety brain was taking over. So I had to get to a place where I wasn't obsessing with my thoughts, where I had some space. I had some space, and we're going to talk about mindfulness in a little bit too. But I think for me, medication gave me, and a lot of other things too, not just medication, but medication gave me that kind of relief that I needed, like that chemical balance of clarity and just like, oh, okay. So this is what, quote unquote, and I hate this word sometimes, but I'm going to use it. This is what normal feels like. This is what even keel feels like. And it allowed me the presence and space to be able to look at the issues that I needed to look at, to be able to really take the self-awareness that I had and look at it critically and be able to learn things like self-compassion, forgiveness, like all of the things that I talk about here on the podcast. I think that if your brain is like a runaway train, it is the biggest uphill battle ever to actually work on the things that you want to work on. So again, Stacey, like that's what kind of jumped out at me in your email. It's not really the question of have you ever stopped therapy to take a break. I think that, and I'm gonna answer that too, but I just wonder if that's not really the issue. That the issue is, do you need to help yourself in a way so you can get to that place of neutrality, so you can just kind of allow your brain to take a breath, so you can kind of come up for air and be like, okay, here are the things that I actually need to work on. I tend to attract a lot of women who are serious go-getters, and they are just like going and going and going. Like, I want to get this personal development thing down. Like, I want to heal my issues. Like, I want to be the best person of me. And that is all great. But when your brain isn't cooperating, I don't even know if that's possible. I can tell you just from personal experience, that was not possible for me. I'm not saying that that's hands down the case for you, Stacey, but I can just tell you my experience. So address the question that you have you ever stopped therapy to take a break? Absolutely. Often. And I don't want this to be like, this is the way you do it. Because it looks vastly different for anyone. But I think just you asking the question, that's your answer. Like yes, it sounds like you need to take a break. And I do think that sometimes we outgrow therapists, and it's good to maybe look for new ones and just trust your gut with that. And I think that maybe you do need to allow yourself some space to take a step back and look at everything. I think, this really reminds me of the podcast episode I did a few weeks ago where I talked about, like, are you half-assing your personal development? So my question for you might be, are you sort of hoarding all of this information that you're getting from your therapist and like all these self-awareness bits and pieces about yourself and then not really doing anything with it? Because I think, like I always say, self-awareness is half the battle. And then you get to a place where it's like, okay, now what are you going to do with all of that information? And therapy is a great way to get to all of that self-awareness and, all the other things that you're doing as well. So for you, it might be a place of take a break from therapy, look through all of your notes, journal on all of the things that you're learning about yourself, all of the things that are like these big takeaways and aha moments. And then you can reconvene and say, like, what do I want to do with this? Do I need to go to a 12-step program for something? Do I need to forgive certain people? What are all these things that you actually want to do in order to improve yourself? Because again, it's like this 50% knowing what's going on and 50% sort of strategy or action, or what are the things that you actually want to do going forward. And also, you're 25, so this isn't something I think that you can wrap up by the end of the year. This is going to be a lifelong process. Like what I just mentioned right there, you might be still working on that when you're 40. In fact, I think that you probably will. And what ends up happening is that we work through some stuff and then we're like, yeah, I got it. I dealt with that daddy issue or whatever it was. And then 5-10 years down the road, maybe you get into a new relationship with somebody and you get triggered and you're like, oh my God, this is back. Why is this back? And then you find yourself back in therapy because there's a whole new layer of it. So I hope that helps. And I hope that sort of answers your question. And I did sort of read between the lines a little bit. And yeah, it's just about, I really invite you to, Stacey, to trust your gut. And it sounds to me that from your email, like you already know what's going on. You are putting too much focus on this and you're obsessing over it. You're losing the rational side of yourself. Again, just you asking that question, have you ever stopped to take therapy, to take a break? It doesn't matter what I've done. Like, to me, it sounds like that's what you want to do. That's maybe what your body is wanting, saying like, Stacey, girl, slow down. Let's not go to therapy every single week to purge and talk about all of our problems. You can take a break. All right. Permission granted. So let's move on to our second question. And I am going to call Kate and we are going to dive in. Ring, 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 ring. Hi, Kate.
Hi, Andrea.
That's me calling you.
Hello.
So I told my listeners I was going to phone a friend. So let's pretend that I called you.
Hi.
And you're my friend that I am going to have on for my listener Q&A.
I love it.
I do too. Before we jump in, I wanted to talk about something briefly. And I know that this is hard for us. Like the whole word briefly for us is difficult. But a couple of podcast episodes ago, I told my listeners about how I was thinking about growing my gray hair out.
Oh, right. We talked about that.
We did.
I think for like an entire day.
Yeah. And it was, well, you were the first person that I told that I was thinking about doing it. And I wanted, let me back up a little bit because I haven't given anybody an update about what I found out. I don't even know if I told you this. I probably told you this because I tell you everything. So I went to my hairdresser. When was this? The Friday before last. Told him again that I was really thinking about it. And he was like, all right. And I'm telling him how I want it to look. And I was showing him some Instagram pictures. And he's like, you're not that gray. Like, how gray do you think you are underneath your color? And I was like, I'm thinking like 50 or 60%. He's like, no. So then he showed me, he was showing me all the different areas of my hair. And he's like, you think you're more gray because where I part my hair, I have a patch. Patch of white.
You need to change that part.
So he's like, I know, it's on the side. And he's like, it's just like how people get patches in their temples. And it just, everyone's different and people have different patches around their scalp. And some people don't have any at all. Yeah. So that is making me feel like I'm more gray. And he said, he's like, honestly, if you grew it out, he's like, I don't think it would be that noticeable. So he said, if you want to do it, now's probably the time. So it wouldn't be so hard for you to grow it out. But that being said, what was funny is that I didn't expect there are some people I've told about it. I get all kinds of different reactions. Some people are like, yeah, go for it. And some people are like, that's interesting. I don't want to do that. Like they're kind of indifferent. And then there's some people like, okay, I have to tell people what your reaction was. Like I tell you like everything. And we use the app Voxer to communicate mostly. And so, we leave each other these messages. And usually like, I'll just tell everyone, Kate's my friend who, like if I want to get fired up about something, I call Kate. Kate's the one who I could come to and I'm like mad about something and like you will hand me the fiery torch. Like if I don't want to get fired up about something, I probably call somebody else. But Kate's my friend. If I need to be completely irrational about anything, you're my girl.
I give you full permission. I hold the space for irrationality.
For irrationality, yes. But you always have something to say. You always have an opinion. But this particular topic, when you messaged me back, you were like, I don't even know what to say to you right now.
I was so triggered.
You said, and I quote, you said, I thought you were as vain as I was. Like I was like defecting from all womankind, but you're not the only one who's reacted that way. And you're not at all.
I was so triggered because, of course, my first thought was, wait, am I going to have to do this?
Is this going to be a thing?
Is this kind of like Sisterhood of the Traveling Gray Hairs where now I have to do it?
Oh my God. I can't be the only one who still colors my hair.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so it's been really interesting, the reactions I've been getting. I have one particular client, she's so cute. She was like, no. It's like, you let somebody else be the spokesperson for that. But I love talking about it because it further shows me how culturally screwed up we are about this and how we really view there's so many different things, regarding women about how we're supposed to be. And this is one of them. Like we view women, especially I think women in their 40s, women with gray hair as undesirable, old, definitely unfuckable. Like, right?
Yeah, right. Yes, 100%. Well, and here's the thing. It's like I had that reaction and then I had to be with myself about my reaction. And then I was like, shit. Now I have to actually deal with this. Now I actually have to look at myself and what is it that I'm resisting about Andrea going gray?
Yeah.
For myself, or this image that I have decided that I need to portray, that you need to portray, the space that we need to hold in the world as women and our vanity. And it was a thing.
It was. And that's not what I was expecting. I was expecting people to be opinionated about it, but I definitely didn't expect it to kind of turn the mirror on other women and have them look at their own views about that and insecurities and things that they've made up about who they are as a woman with a certain kind of hair. And really too, it's, I wonder if the people in my close circle and even the podcast listeners is if that I am making things suddenly unsafe, because if I do this, we do have an element of safety, how we're kind of all the same, and if I, it is sort of like defecting, like I'm like leaving.
Yes, absolutely. There was a level of betrayal that I was like, wait a minute, what? Right. Like, no,
absolutely. We all have to, I think subconsciously we feel, it must be some kind of like community tribe thing, how we all carry this secret, quote unquote secret, that we color our hair. Yes. I'm feeling like I'm not fooling anybody.
Well, and I think it's also different if you're single, if you're married, I loved your response when I asked you what your husband thought about it.
Oh, that he's colorblind.
He's colorblind. well, she's off the hook. I mean,
he doesn't notice. He only notices if I've drastically changed color. So if like I think maybe 2 or 3 times since we've been married, I've gone from blonde to brunette, like in one fatal swoop. And he'll be like, oh, you changed your hair. But like if I'm subtly going blonder or darker, he doesn't notice at all. So if I went platinum, he probably would notice, because that's what my hairdresser said he would do to help me go gray. But he wouldn't notice. So I don't even have that. It would really be about me. And being someone who has an online platform, and how my, like my one-dimensional life, like, pictures of me is my livelihood. Yep. It's a big deal. And then I'm like, kind of like, oh my God, am I going to, I feel like I've been the spokesperson for getting sober. I've been the spokesperson for having a child on the autism spectrum. I'm like, God damn it. Am I going to be the spokesperson
for going naturally gray?
Yeah. And I have no qualms too, like, about trying it. And then if I hate it, I'm not going to be one of those people who's like, oh, my pride. And I'd much rather, like, yes, my sobriety is super important to stay sober, but like, if I hate it 3 or 6 months in going gray, I'll go back.
Well, listen, I did it last year. I mean, you went through that with me, where I went red for a year, and it really changed things in ways that I actually didn't anticipate. And it was really weird and uncomfortable, because I didn't feel like me. Yeah. I really didn't feel like me. And it was really confronting. And partly because I'm used to being blonde. Right. I'm used to walking around and, there's just that thing that people notice blondes more. And suddenly nobody was checking me out. And ironically, at the same time, I had lost a ton of weight, and I probably physically looked better than ever. But nobody noticed. And it was really, I had to deal with my ego on that level. It was a huge deal.
It's a lot of ego. And
it's a lot of ego.
What's interesting to me is I didn't realize, you would think I would realize that, but I didn't realize all of those layers and elements were in it. To me, it was just kind of like, well, maybe I'll grow my gray hair out. And then I started to look into it, and I'm reading all these blog posts and hashtag granny hair. It's a hashtag.
Wow.
We call it. Yeah.
Granny hair.
Granny hair. And and ego and vanity and so many cultural things that we have created.
And outward, and really just outward validation, right? Like, walking into a store and having people check you out and or not is suddenly weird.
It is. Yeah.
Yep.
All right.
Gross.
Well, that's not what we came here to talk about. I appreciate all your opinions on that. And it will be, stay tuned, everybody, because it will be an ongoing conversation, I'm sure. But this is kind of part 2 of this particular episode, this listener Q&A episode. And this question comes from a listener named Amy. And she says, I would love a podcast over what it really means and looks like to be with your feelings. I alternate between numbing and anxiety. I can go full-blown panic attacks. It is causing problems at work and, more importantly, my marriage. I'm not as patient with my kids and really just don't want to deal with anything at all. Why can't there be a 12-step program dealing with depression and anxiety? What do I do next? I'm working on yoga and meditation. I exercise at least 4 times a week. To the outside world, I'm strong, calm, and have the ideal life. I have lost 2 people very close to me, my sister 2 years ago and my stepdad, who I considered my father not even a year ago. I really don't want to take medication. I have always been a worrier and people pleaser. Amy, thank you so much for submitting that question. And Kate, let's start with her question where she says, what do I do next? And I think what jumped out at me is she said, I really don't want to deal with anything at all. So my question for you is, let's start with what does she do next? And I'm super curious, have you ever been in that place where she says, I don't want to deal with anything at all? And what did you do? And what do you think would be best for Amy?
Wow. Yes, I'm there all the time. To be perfectly honest.
Right now, actually. Bye.
Right now. Right? No, right? Bye. So first of all, I want to acknowledge Amy for all that she is doing. I mean, that's one of the things that popped out to me, that she's doing yoga, meditation, she's exercising. It sounds like she's doing everything, quote, right, and sometimes, all of the things that we know in the self-help world that can help us to keep our brains balanced in a healthy way, sometimes they're not enough. And so the first thing I want to do is acknowledge her for all of the stuff that she is doing, because I think that sometimes we overlook that. Sometimes we're like, well, yeah, of course I'm doing all those things, but it's actually a big deal when you're in the midst of overwhelming anxiety and panic attacks to do those basic self-care pieces. So the fact that you're doing those, Amy, I want to say, like, yay, like really amazing. And in terms of what to do next, I mean, in my opinion, and I'm not a medical professional, I am a trained, certified life coach, as is Andrea. And there are certain things that are therapy issues. And I do think that if you're doing absolutely everything that you can possibly think of to do on your own, sometimes outside help really is needed. And, there's no shame in that. There just isn't. And to answer your question, Andrea, it's hilarious because I think I said the other day, I posted on Facebook the other day, you guys, my therapist is really good. I'm so annoyed.
Yes.
Because
we can't pull one over on our therapist.
Right. I'm like, God, really? There's more? And I am like, I've got almost 20 years of 12-step work under my belt. I've got, a decade's worth of therapy under my belt. I am a professional. I am a personal development professional. And really, there's more. And I just don't want to.
Yeah.
And, sometimes, unfortunately, the more work you do, the more work there is to do. And and I'm grateful. I'm so grateful. But I get that just like,
more again. Yeah.
More again.
So
really.
Times.
Yeah.
I agree with everything you said. And I the one thing I want to argue with is that you said you're not a medical professional, but you've played one on TV. Tell everyone. I will. Everyone, go Google Nurse Kate on Grey's Anatomy, and that was Kate Anthony. How many seasons? Was it one season or two?
Oh, it was five.
The first 5 seasons, right?
Yeah. Okay. I started in season 2. I don't remember. It was so long ago. I had just had my baby. I don't know. It starts out with me like having completely really full breasts that need to be pumped. Do you remember that? I didn't want to be the one on set to be like, hey, I need to pump. So yeah, it kind of starts around there.
Nurse Kate. Okay, so kind of a medical professional, but not really.
But not really, exactly.
But I mean, yes, I agree with a lot of things that you said, and there's several sentences that jump out at me, and we're going to get to the question about what it means and looks like to be with your feelings. And I mentioned this in the first part of the podcast, where the other listener had posed the question and said, I heard one of her sentences was, I feel like I lose my rational mind. And I think, I wonder if that's kind of happening for Amy too, is that I feel like in order to get to a place where we are able to work on our stuff and really think rationally about things and learn new tools and new ways of behaving and coping skills, we have to get to that place where we're using our rational mind. If you are clinically depressed and or have clinical anxiety, then you're not in that place. So you can do all the yoga and all the meditation and all the exercising and all the green smoothies. That can help a little bit, but it gets to a point where it's not going to get you to that place of neutrality, of homeostasis that you need to be in. So I think both of us are saying, if you haven't already talked to a doctor and or a trusted therapist or psychiatrist, go and see because for anyone listening who hasn't gone, I don't know if this was your experience, Kate, when I went, so when I was 26-ish, might have been 27, I got to my breaking point with anxiety. I didn't know what was wrong with me. I felt like I was going crazy. I didn't know I was having panic attacks. And I went to the doctor, and I don't remember if my therapist had told me to go or not, because therapists don't prescribe medication. So my therapist may have told me to go, probably, I don't remember. And so I go to the doctor and she has me fill out this pretty lengthy questionnaire. And if you've ever been to therapy and gone through like the paperwork process, it's probably pretty similar, but they're getting like the basics of how you are mentally and emotionally, getting a feel. And so this one was specific for anxiety and depression. And I tested with severe generalized anxiety disorder and moderate panic disorder. And it was a bittersweet pill to swallow, I think, because on one hand, there was relief that I wasn't going crazy. And on the other hand, I was really angry. I felt like my body had betrayed me. I was not someone who had very much compassion for mental illness because I didn't understand it. I grew up feeling like you need to just figure it out. And, watching my father struggle with depression right after him and my mom split up and he got sober was very confusing because nobody really explained it to me and I never asked anyone. So that was my experience of my diagnosis. And I went on medication for about 4 years. No, longer than that. I can't remember. It might have been like a decade. I have no idea. No, sorry. It was like 4 years. It was like 4 years because I got pregnant. Right. And it changed my life, to be honest with you. It made me realize like, oh, okay, this is what it feels like to react in a normal way. This is what it feels like to not, like, I hate to say it, but like, I felt like I was losing my mind. I was losing control.
Yeah. I 100% agree with that. I really resonate with that experience. For me, when I was dealing with my anxiety, I actually didn't know what it was.
Yeah, me neither.
Right? Like I had this physical sensation. I was like, I can't breathe. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. And I would tell my therapist this and we would talk about the feeling. And then I was also suffering from extreme depression at the time. It was right after my divorce. I had no idea who I was and what my whole life was, up in arms. And I went to my doctor, and I said, I think I'm depressed. I think I might need to go on medication. And he said, well, what about anxiety? And I was like, oh, wait, is that thing in my sternum where I can't breathe? And I'm like, debilitated? And he was like, yeah, that would be anxiety. And when I want to destigmatize medication because I know Amy says I really don't want to take medication. And I get that. Like I fully get that. And I'm not advocating for it for you, for Amy, because I couldn't do that. But I often wonder when people say, I really don't want to take medication. And I say, well, I think like, why? Why not? Right? Because there is a stigma, there are side effects, there's all sorts of reasons not to. But if you're not doing it because of the stigma, right? If you're not doing it for physical reasons or all of that, I get that. But I feel like we have to destigmatize it in a way that's responsible. And, I talk about my experience with medication a lot because I think it helps people. I think it helps people to go, oh, wow, okay. And I think for you too, Andrea, like, for people like us who people turn to for help, for us to go, hey, we did it, and it helped. I think it's important. I really do. And again, I'm not advocating for or against it for anyone individually. I just think that there's a stigma that we need to break down because it really can be so helpful.
Completely. And again, and you're going to hear Kate and I say this over and over again because we are not doctors and I just don't think it's for everyone, but I do think it's for some people. And I don't think it's for everyone forever because I often wonder if people think that like, well, once I get on it, I'll be on it forever. And that's not true. I mean, I was on it for several years. And then the reason I stopped was because I got pregnant and they told me, well, the one that you were on is not okay for pregnancy, but we can find one that works. And then I was like, going to have to go through that. And I was like, you know what, let me just see how I feel without it. And I'll take it from there. And I was okay. And so, which is a great segue for, the whole, how it looks to feel your feelings. Here is a reason that I think that helped me get off medication and stay off medication. I don't think that this works for everyone, so I don't want to say this is how you do it. But for me, I really think, did I tell you, Kate, about what happened with my blood pressure? I did, didn't I?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
Remind me. Tell tell us.
So I will. So glad you asked. So I had chronic hypertension from the time I was a teenager. It's something that runs in my family. My maternal grandmother had it and was not taken care of well enough for it. She also had 11 children, and she died of a massive heart attack when she was 52, I believe. I know she was in her early 50s. My mom was 22. It was long before I was born. And then my mother has it and has been on medication for a long time. And long story short, I was put on medication for high blood pressure in my 20s. And I know, and it was always really, and the kind of interesting thing is that, so throughout my teens and into my 20s, every time I would go to the doctor or anytime I had my blood pressure taken, it was high. And they would say, that's interesting. But nobody ever said, we should go and check this out and you might need medication, because I did not fall under
because you were basically a kid.
Because I was young and I was not overweight. I didn't smoke or do any of have risk factors for it, except that I did have it. So what ended up happening is, I'll never forget it. I had the flu, and at the time I had just started a brand new job and I didn't have insurance, and my dad took me to urgent care and paid cash for it. It was so sweet. And then they took my blood pressure there, and it was so bad. And the doctor, it was just this random ER doctor. He was like, is it always like this? And I said, yes, it's been like that for years. And he said, if you don't get on medication from your regular doctor, you will have a heart attack by the time you are 40 if this keeps up.
Wow.
And I was like, holy crap. So I got on medication, and I had been on it forever. And I was even on it when I was pregnant with both of my children. And then we moved and we left. This is when we left Utah and moved to North Carolina. So, I was already in my late 30s at that point. And I ran out of medication and hadn't gotten around to getting a brand new doctor. And I've always had one of those high blood pressure kits where I monitor my own. And I'm like, I should probably check my blood pressure just to see, if it's okay. And I checked it and it was kind of okay. But I'm like, well, this machine is pretty old, so it's probably not right. So finally, a year after we moved to North Carolina, I go to the doctor and I told her, I have chronic hypertension. I've been medicated for 15 years, and here's all the medications I've been on, thinking she's just going to prescribe me. And they took my blood pressure and she's like, your blood pressure is normal. And I was like, how, you don't understand. After I had Colton, my blood pressure was 210 over 190. I was seeing stars. I was seeing stars. And my stepmom, who is a nurse, was in the room with me, and she was freaking out. She's like, you don't understand. She is going to have a seizure. Anyway, so she got me on, it was an IV. I was so sick. I was in the hospital for a week after Colton was born. And because of that. So it's it's no joke. It's not just wildly high. It's been bad. Right. So the point of my story is that it turns out it went away. And I attribute it, and I don't know for sure, but it started to happen when I got sober and when I started to deal with my shit. When I started to heal from, and by no means am I totally healed. I started to deal with my grief. I started to look at all the scary as shit stuff that I had stuffed down my entire life. All started to come out, and I started to learn how to feel my feelings. My high blood pressure went away. Do you think it's a coincidence? I don't think it's a coincidence.
I don't think so either. I don't. And listen, again, we're not medical professionals, even though I said it on TV.
Disclaimer.
But I agree. And here's the thing that also pops out to me about Amy's email is that she's had tremendous amount of loss in the last couple of years, and that there is grief, and grief is a son of a bitch. And I frankly don't know a lot about it because I've never experienced it to this degree. And so, Andrea, you are probably the better person to address that. But I think it would be irresponsible in talking about Amy's email to not point that out, that when we don't deal with our grief and when we don't deal with the feelings, it leaks out the sides. It's like we're trying to contain. I always it's a weird analogy, but I always feel like it's like a container of slime, and we're trying to squish it together, and it is always pushing out the sides in some other way, right? Whether that's through hypertension or whether that's through anxiety or whether that's, and grief is one of those things that is so all encompassing that it's almost like it comes out at the end of Amy's email, and I kind of feel like it's probably primary.
Yeah.
I
agree.
And so that's probably something that you can address more clearly. But I agree that when we don't want to look at that stuff, we don't want to deal with the grief, we don't want to deal with the trauma, we don't want to, this is why I was in my therapist's office earlier this week going like, oh no, please don't make me do that again. Please don't make me do that again. But, I'm in there dealing with some really intense stuff. And if I don't deal with this other stuff, like that's why it's happening again. That's why I'm back in therapy, because there's still stuff that's still unresolved that's coming out in the present and affecting my life in different ways, right? And it's sort of like that thing where you have like a calf injury but your back hurts, right? And I'm not sure if I'm making a whole lot of sense, but I feel like grief, when we don't deal with our feelings, when we don't feel our feelings, even the really ugly, painful, horrible ones we just don't want to deal with, it turns into anxiety. It turns into panic attacks.
Yeah. And she might have been predisposed to that already. And, before her sister and her stepdad died. And then I think what tends to happen, I mean, this was definitely the case for me when the really hard stuff happened, I had no coping skills. So I immediately went to, in my body, it was insomnia, panic attacks, and just massive anxiety, chronic. I had mild depression, but mostly mine manifested with anxiety and insomnia and obsessive. There was also obsessive compulsive disorder too, like looking back at my behaviors and even some of them now too. I'm like, oh yeah, that was there as well. And she talks about numbing as well. And I totally agree that we don't want to, and it is hard to deal with it and look at it. And it's easier to just like, well, maybe I'll do more yoga. Maybe I'll work out more. And again, I think that can be helpful, but it's quite frankly, it's not enough. And so, all right. So in terms of like, how do you actually feel your feelings? I think that like you did in the beginning of this conversation, I want to acknowledge her for the really great thing, Amy, is that you're at a point where you're like, okay, this isn't working. Like, what's going on? And I think acknowledging it first and foremost, like that there is something massive that's going on, and like your body's trying to tell you something is what is happening. I just finally started reading that book, The Body Keeps the Score. Have you read it, Kate?
No.
Oh my God. Okay. Run out, everyone. I'll put a link in the show notes. I got it on Audible because I like to read or listen to self-help. And I mean, there's a reason just on Audible alone, there's over 2,500 5-star reviews. It's a doctor who wrote it. It's scientific about trauma, and because grief is trauma, and what happens to our bodies, and basically how our bodies hold on to what happens to us, and we have to process it. And so I haven't gotten that far into it yet, but I can just tell you from experience, Amy, like what I have done. And there are very specific things. Like first and foremost is therapy and working with someone that you really trust. And I have been through, I had one therapist that I loved for a long, long, long time back in San Diego. She retired and we moved, so I no longer talk to her anymore. But I've been through, I think 5 since her. There was 2 or 3 in Utah, and there was 2 here. And I found someone here now in North Carolina that I really, really like. And I'll actually in 2 weeks, I'm doing a podcast episode about that, like how to find a great therapist and how to get the most out of therapy. So I don't want to jump in too much about that, but it's also about having people in your life that you trust enough that you can come to where you can have these breakdowns, because I'm sure that that's, if it hasn't come already, it's coming in regards to the death of these people that you cared immensely about. And what I'm talking about are these, breakdowns in the shower or, on the kitchen floor where you're just crying so hard and and you don't really have anything to say. Can you do that in the presence of another human being who can just sit with you? And I'm not saying that those kind of grief episodes need to happen every time. I don't at all. I think that a lot of your grieving can be in private, but I think that when you need to let someone take care of you, because grief is, like you were saying, Kate, it's like, it's all encompassing. It has the feeling, like, I feel like there are times where I'm like, I feel like it's swallowing me whole. Like, what is happening to me? And I've always struggled with surrender. And there's 2 times in my life where I feel like surrender has taken me to school. And that is giving birth. Yeah. And
no kidding.
And losing my father, because I have tried to control everything in my life. And those 2 things were things that I had no control over. And the way that I look at grief too is, I was telling my friend Carrie this, and I was saying, it's the times where grief knocks on the door, and if I come out to the front porch and have a street fight with it, that's when it doesn't go very well, or it's a lot harder. And that's when I resist it. That's when I push down the tears. That's when I get angry about it still coming around. But on the days where I open the door and see it standing there and I roll my eyes at it and just like let it come in and sit down, it doesn't stay very long. So what that looks like is just crying when it comes up. And for me, and I don't know if this is the case for you, Amy, but it's the things that I thought that would really knock me over. And, like my birthday and, these bigger events, but it's the smaller things that just totally floor me. Like I was at the coffee shop and there was a guy that walked in and I happened to see that he had the same shoes and socks that my dad used to wear. It's like these small things where, my husband bought a football and we were outside throwing the football around, and my husband was, and me, because I know how to throw a pretty fierce spiral, we're showing the kids how to do it. You hold the football here, you do this and this and this. And I thought to myself, my dad taught me how to do this. And it is small things like that where like the emotion and the tears come, and I just let it come instead of saying like, well, this is an inappropriate time, or I don't want to deal with this. And it passes fairly quickly. But if I don't let it out, again, it's like that slime that you were saying, like it's gonna come out somewhere. And you know where it comes out? It comes out when you are, blowing up at your kids and pissed off at your husband.
Yep.
Road rage.
Absolutely. Yep.
That's what that is.
And here's the thing, I just had this moment of how you, and I don't know if you actually did this, but to have that moment in front of your children, so often we feel that we have to hide our feelings from our kids, or we have to shield our kids from our grief or our pain. And the fact of the matter is, the more that we actually experience our feelings in front of our children, the more capacity they have to be with their own feelings. Yeah. And so many of our problems, and this is, this is the first sentence of Amy's email about, what does it look like to be with your feelings? And so most of us were raised, certainly of our generation, were not shown what it was like to be with feelings. We did not come by this naturally, because our parents were of the generation that didn't talk about their feelings, and certainly hid them from us because they were trying to protect us. But what that did was didn't actually give us a roadmap for how to be with our own feelings. Yeah. And the more we allow our feelings in front of our children, the more we, process our feelings, not just in private, but as you said, with other people, including our children, the more of a roadmap we provide for them, and the more ability they have in their lives to be with feelings. And they're not scary. We're so frightened of our feelings because we weren't, partly, I think, partly because they're big and they're scary and they hurt. And partly because we were not taught how to be with them. Right. And if our children have access to our private moments, it'll be less scary for them as they grow. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't remember who said this on the internet. Somebody that I follow, it might have been Brene Brown or Glennon Doyle Melton, about I can't shield my children from their feelings and their struggles, but I can be a soft place for them to land when they have them. And yes, and I think the way we do that, it is, and I think that the way that we do that is by being that. Mm-hmm. Right? How do we teach our children that we are their soft place to land if we're so busy putting up walls and having it all together?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, you mentioned like some families just, hide their emotions. I think some families had emotions and they may not have had great emotional boundaries, but they never discussed it later. It was like, you just leave the children to try to figure out what was going on their own, which they can't do. And so that's one thing I try to teach my kids too, and just make it all okay. But for Amy, being now that she's an adult, I think it's also, I'll give you another tip that's really helped me is writing about it. And you don't have to be a writer. You just have to be somebody who knows how to read and write and just go for it and just anything, like just get it out on paper. Because I know for me, a lot of times I can't make sense of my feelings until I get them out on paper. For me, it comes out sometimes as really dark, kind of like beat poetry, which I know like isn't for everyone, but just getting out your feelings. I've written, you can write letters to people, write a letter to your sister, write a letter to your stepfather, write a letter to, and I think also when it comes to grief and someone passing away, I have found that it was very confusing for me because there were so many emotions for me to grapple with. I knew I would be sad, but what took me by surprise, I didn't know I was also going to be angry and have regret and be furious at times and irritated. Like I was so irritated with so many people and lonely. Like the loneliness, I think, just brought me down so much. And then when you're in that loneliness, that's especially when we don't want to reach out, because grief is such it is a full contact emotion. And I think that, just if Amy, if you could walk away with just talk to somebody who, a grief counselor or a therapist, and or hopefully someone that you trust enough to say, I'm falling apart. I don't need you to fix it. I just need you to stand here in this moment with me and give me a hug, or, put your hand on my back as I am sobbing. Just be with me. And that's going to be really uncomfortable for that other person, depending on where they are with their own feelings. But it's extremely vulnerable for that person too. So it has to be the right person. And which is why a therapist is sort of such a good person for that, because they're trained to be able to absorb that and hold that as well. Absolutely. Yeah. So I think those two are really big steps. There are other tools, but I know my people, and I know that they like to have a lot of things. Like, I want a lot of choices, and I want to do all of them, and I want to have this big to-do list of all the ways I can do this. And actually, in my book, Amy, the one that's coming out in December, there's an entire chapter on numbing, and I have 8 tools. But I think that the ones that we gave, I think those are the biggest. And I really want to emphasize both of them, but especially the one about sharing your story. And that in and of itself can be daunting, but I think is so very important.
I agree. I really do. I think the more we get it out, the safer we become, right? The more, and we're at a point where, anything happens in my life or your life, and we're on the Boxer, we're sharing, we're opening all that stuff up. And it is such a relief. It's a pressure cooker when we don't.
Oh, totally. I still struggle with that a little bit. It's what I think also helps. What's helped me is to catch myself when I'm making up stories about not reaching out. And that's tricky because, these beliefs and these stories get so embedded, and they're subconscious for so many of us, and they are for me sometimes too. But I realize when I start to feel resentful or irritated, and I'm like, that's sort of like my red flag that something's going on. There's a conversation I'm not having with someone. I'm holding stuff in, and it's multi-layered, and but it's so worth it once you finally start to figure it out. And it's not linear, Amy. I wish it was. But it's not.
Right? It's not be great. Yeah. Well, and here's the thing that you're pointing to, Andrea, is this idea that, getting to know ourselves, right? And getting to know, oh, look, I'm having a reaction. Is the reaction about what's actually happening? Or is this reaction about something else that's going on that I'm not processed or not dealing with, right? And so often our reactions are indicators. They're great indicators about what might really be going on. And what I would encourage you to do is in those moments to stop and check in with yourself and check in with your body. Because our body, as Andrea was saying in this book, which sounds great, right? Our bodies are great indicators of what's happening with us. Our bodies are great, indicator, I guess is the best word, right? So, when we start to freak out, to stop and say, okay, where am I feeling this? What am I feeling? I'm feeling tightness in my chest. Okay. Like just to be completely present in the moment, your question is, what does it mean and look like to be with your feelings? And often because we carry our feelings in our bodies, what it really looks like is to ask ourselves where we feel the feelings. Where is the tightness? Where is the pain? Really pay attention, right? And to breathe into that. And it might take you down I know, right? I know, right? Oh God, no, please no, right? So it might take you down further. It also might be soothing and calming.
Yeah.
To a degree, because it helps get us out of our heads.
Right.
Right.
And I am testimony to the person who used to think to myself, there's no way I'm going to do that, because if I open up that door, I might never stop crying. I might never come out alive. And you will. But I went in kicking and screaming, and I got to a point where the alternative was that I was falling apart. So it's like, okay, either I fall apart the hard way or I fall apart the easy way.
Right. Exactly. It's going to leak out the edges, or I can actually be a party to it. Like I can actually be in partnership with my pain, or my pain can just take over my life.
Yeah. Right? And that's where I was at. And so, that was much of the reason why I got sober and really jumped into this work. And yeah, I'm okay on the other end. It has been, since I got sober, it has been the most eye-opening about this whole world of feelings and what that looks like. And I'm still learning stuff, almost 6 years later. And Amy, we wish you the best of luck. And I hope that this was helpful. Kate, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me, Andrea. And again, Amy, I second Andrea's motion. Wish you the best of luck, and please continue to take care of yourself and reach out. Yeah,
absolutely. You guys heard it here from Nurse Kate. I love that. Okay, everyone. So the show notes for the episode that I was talking about going gray, there are links to that, as well as the book, The Body Keeps the Score, as well as the link to the Tanning and Tacos and Transformation Conference, which is open for registration. Early bird price is only on until June 6th. So get your booty on the dance floor and get over there, you guys. So thank you so much for being here. And until next time, I will see you out in cyberspace. Bye-bye.